Check Podcasts.
Hi, I'm Bruce Williams. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce, and this is Chamber Chats, coming to you, as always, from the podcasting studios here at the Czech Media Group. I would like to begin, as always, by acknowledging that I live and work in the ancestral lands of the Lekwungen-speaking nations known to us as Songhees and Esquimalt. And all of this, Chamber Chats, is made possible by the support of Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union, who are redefining what banking can do for people, for our communities, and for our world. Speaking of our world, every day we have the opportunity to enjoy the views of the water, the ocean, the channels, the rivers, the things that are all around us all the time. It's one of the great things about being in a coastal place to live, right? Coastal community. Recently on Chamber Chats, we were chatting with an organization called COAST, the Center for Ocean Applied Sustainable Technologies, one of the very interesting organizations right now, looking to build what's being referred to as the blue economy. There's a whole concentration of those things about the ocean, and they are made up of these really cool companies. We're going to talk about one right now, a company called Rockland Scientific. And the gentleman who is the president and co-founder of Rockland Scientific is Fabian Wolk, and he joins us now. Fabian, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you, Bruce?
Good, thank you. So let's do something we do very often on Chamber Chats. Let's say you meet someone for the first time. You say, oh, yeah, I run a company called Rockland Scientific. And somebody says, what is that? What do you do? What's your answer?
Yeah, good question. So that comes up a lot, actually, because I get around quite a bit. So the standard answer is that we're an ocean technology company with a mission to fight climate change. It wasn't always like this, that we had that tagline ready. It was a longer one when we were still in our technical heads, but now that's where we arrived.
Yeah, this climate change stuff is what we have to do to steward the oceans, right? Because we've not done that. We've not treated the oceans very well. So we're going to sort of unpack, if you will, what you guys do. Tell me about the history of the company, though. You were saying you began in 2005. Tell me about the initial formation.
Yeah, so we're coming out of the University of Victoria. So the two founders were myself and Rolf Lueck, who was my academic advisor for my graduate work at University of Victoria. We used early versions of the instruments and products that we're selling today to study heat exchange processes in the upper ocean. So this was research work, and after I graduated, I went around the globe for a few years and chased down jobs in academia and industry. And then I realized that there's a trend of interest and demand for this type of instrumentation that we've been using for the research. And so after a few years, I returned to Victoria and teamed up with Rolf, and we started the company to build these instruments.
So there had to be sort of a time when you were chatting with those other partners and the other founders to say, okay, here's where we've arrived at. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do this. What was that like coming to that point?
So there was this need that we realized that there's out there this demand for this type of instrumentation. And I walked into Rolf's office and I said, let's do this. So, like you build them, I sell them, you know. And Rolf at first thought, oh, you're crazy. We're going to sell 2 or 3 of these things. And here we are, 25 years later almost. And yeah, it was an exciting time. Then we brought in 2 early people that helped us, Peter and Rick. And we built that company up to where it is now.
So there were 4 of you in the beginning, and how many now in the team?
It's we're actually, as of today, we're 31.
See, that's the kind of growth we love to see around here. That grows our economy. So you're a German. You're from Germany. Why Victoria? Why did you do this here when you could have done it pretty much anywhere in the world? Because you did tour the world. Why here?
Yeah, that was basically just a lifestyle choice where I ended up here in Victoria. But so I came as a student, and then I studied at the university. And with hindsight, it was the right location for our business, because as you see now, like we have all these very cool, like you mentioned, ocean tech companies that this whole ecosystem has sprouted up through companies like ours and open ocean robotics and barnacle systems and you name it, marine labs. And then we have these very strong sort of infrastructure that helps this ecosystem here, like Ocean Networks Canada. We have industry organizations like Coasts that really help us to pull all this together here.
Yeah, Ocean Networks Canada and Open Ocean Robotics have been on Chamber Chats in the past, and Barnacle is on the list, and they're going to join us as well. So, before we talk about the whole process that you go through with the technology that you use, what are the outcomes? What does your work result in us understanding better or understanding better about the planet?
So what we do, what we bring to the table, based on our mission, is ocean sensor. It's a certain type of sensor technology that allows our customers to measure ocean turbulence. That's what we do. That's the sort of like the purpose of our work, is to support oceanographers and scientists in measuring and understanding ocean turbulence, because and we've landed on that parameter because we felt that is a critical parameter to study, and it's one of the key factors that controls the exchange between the atmosphere and the ocean. So turbulence transports gases, particulates, and heat, like temperature, across the ocean atmosphere interface, and also facilitates that transport down into the deeper layers.
Yeah, I mean the change or the monitoring of turbulence is part of the change in climate change, right? That's kind of what you're looking at here.
Exactly. Yeah. So so our sensors measure basically how water is mixing, and so just like you would put your cream in your coffee, if you just let it sit there, it would sort of like form a layer on the bottom. But if you put your spoon into it and you start stirring it, you're creating turbulence, and that creates a state change, basically an irreversible change. Now you have a new fluid that has a different density, has a different temperature, and that process then drives like whole bigger processes in the ocean, like this overturning circulation, water getting heated at the equators, moving poleward where it sinks down. And so that whole ocean conveyor belt that you may have heard of is driven in part by turbulence processes.
So is that, I'm not a scientist, nor do I ever play one on television, but is the turbulence in water related to the temperature of the water the same as the temperature of air? Hot air rises. Is that same sort of principle in place with this?
It is. So like just like in the atmosphere, you have like high pressure areas and low pressure areas, and so at the interfaces of these systems, at the interface between the ocean and the atmosphere, at the ocean bottom, you have these turbulence processes. They are usually set up by some part of the water moving over another part of the water, and so that friction creates turbulence.
Can we see that? Like if we're flying harbor air, or if we're in a boat, if we're up on a cliff or something looking at the water, can we with our naked eye see evidence of that happening?
Well, you can see it. You can see it sometimes when you have a cloud in the sky. You see these sort of like, you may have seen, it almost looks like cresting waves. These are they're called Kelvin-Helmholtz waves, and they manifest in the ocean at these interfaces between different air masses. And so if you happen to have like a layer of cloud there, that acts as a tracer that shows you what's going on in the atmosphere. The same processes happen in the ocean, and that's the important part that needs to be understood. Rather than seeing it, when you brought up harbor air, when you're flying harbor air sometimes, and you're flying over, let's say you're flying over the ocean, all of a sudden you hit like the Salt Spring Island or something, and all of a sudden the plane goes like this. So that's turbulence, and that's what you feel. That's the effects of turbulence there.
So Rockland Scientific uses this really cool set of equipment to do all the stuff that they do, and we're going to talk about that next. Our guest today on Chamber Chats is Fabian Wolk. He is the president and co-founder of Rockland Scientific, who work to measure turbulence within the waters of our oceans around us here. So you have things like profiling systems, moored systems, modular systems. Tell me about the actual gear, the equipment that you're using to do this work.
Yeah, so the gear that we use is basically what you see. The most of what you see, if you look at our website and you look at the equipment that we make, those gadgets are really just a carrier vehicle for the actual sensors that measure the turbulence, and they're usually small sensors. They're the size of a pencil, and they're in contact with the water, measuring the turbulence parameters such as temperature or the fluctuations of the actual velocity. That's the stuff that you feel when you fly in the airplane, and our sensors basically feel that. And so these instruments that you see, they are basically deployment vehicles. And we make them all here in Victoria. All of the design and the manufacturing is done here in Victoria, at our facility on Dublin Road, right on the Victoria-Saanich border there near the Mayfair Mall. And yeah, from there we ship those instruments into 30 countries around the world.
And you mentioned Dublin Road. People are going, I know where Dublin Road is. They probably drive past your location and not realize all this stuff that's going on inside. But so the sensor you mentioned is only the size of, say, a pencil or a pen, but
Yeah, exactly.
they're housed inside these larger. They kind of look like torpedoes or something. But tell me about that whole housing and how that works.
Yeah, so the housing is actually mostly empty. It's a pressure case because these instruments, they have to withstand water pressures. We send them down to, or our customers use them to go between like the ocean surface and sometimes down to 6,000 meters. We actually had a customer at the University of Hawaii who sent one of our instruments down to 11,000 meters into the Mariana Trench. So these pressure housings that you see, what's inside them is mainly electronics and air. Air basically just to provide a certain amount of buoyancy that we need. And then the sensors, like the pencil that you just showed, are the actual transducers that measure the turbulence, and they are mounted outside of this pressure housing at the leading edge. And so these instruments, they fall either vertically through the water column like a dart, usually deployed from a ship. More and more, we are mounting our sensor payloads as a smaller component onto these underwater robots. So there's this proliferation in the last 10, 20 years of what's called underwater gliders. This is a technology that has been developed in the University of, what was it? I think it was Scripps in California. I actually I have a Lego model right here
Oh,
of one. I don't know if you can see it. I don't know,
oh yeah.
maybe the blur of the filter is going. So it looks like this. It looks kind of like a little airplane underwater, and it glides through the water and it carries our sensors. And these things can go underwater on a time scale of weeks to months and take measurements. And that's how oceanographic research is done. And more. So we have spent the last sort of like 10 years of our time actually sort of repackaging our own technology into payloads that can go onto these gliders, or also profiling floats that go vertically up and down in the water column.
So they're controlled remotely, right?
Yes, they're well,
Or are they
sort of.
programmed?
They're actually piloted. They're remotely piloted. Once they're underwater, you have no connection to them. But once in a while, they come back up to the surface, receive new waypoints, and then say, "Okay, orientate themselves. I go this way," and then they dive off into that direction.
And I just want to get this right. So the data is captured within the device when it's in the water, but does it transmit back while it's in the water?
Yes, so the data are sampled and then captured in the device. There they are sort of pre-processed. We collect quite a number of data points, quite a lot of volume of data that then needs to be kind of reduced so that it's capable of transmission through satellite communication, which has low bandwidth. And so we went through quite a bit of R&D to pre-process the data into a format that can be transmitted.
Yeah, you mentioned that there's a university involved in using this stuff that you make. Who else buys it? Is it all post-secondaries, or who buys these things?
Yeah, it's so the overall majority of our customers are scientists at universities or research facilities. They write a research grant, they get the money, they buy our equipment, do the measurements, and then write the paper.
And this happens all over the world, right?
Yes, yeah. So most of our business comes from the US and Europe, but we have customers in over 30 countries. So recently we brought on India and South America. New Zealand is a good customer of ours. They do a lot of work around New Zealand and also into the Antarctic.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned about you're German, and one of the countries where you do business is Germany. Germany is not like New Zealand or India, where we think of places with a very large coastline. But tell me what's going on in Germany.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find that fascinating. So I'm German, and so Germany has actually quite a large sort of oceanographic research footprint in the world. I mean, they operate two deep ocean research vessels like the Polarstern and research vessel Sonne, and they are doing on these month-long missions. And like you said, Germany, pretty small coastline, really has a strong extrapolation of their research out into the Antarctic and wherever. So they have these large facilities. They have been our customers for a long time, buying quite a number of our research equipment for their research. Yeah.
So all of this equipment that Rockland Scientific is creating is gathering all of this data. What happens with the data is what we're going to talk about next. Fabian Wolk is our guest today on Chamber Chats. He is the president and co-founder of Rockland Scientific, one of the marine tech industries happening around our region. So all of this data is gathered, Fabian, around the world in different places by these people who buy the devices that you manufacture. What do they do with the data?
So the data, yeah, so the individual scientists or the institutes, let's say, for example, National Oceanography Center in the UK, they would collect the data. It's usually driven by a PI, a principal investigator, who's a scientist. They own the data initially, and they would use the data to do their research and write the publication. And usually what happens after the publication is done, data goes into some public archive where it is accessible to the scientific community or the public at large. So that's, it's often public money that funds these research expeditions, and so the data are available to the public, and then anybody else can use them. For example, Ocean Networks Canada does this in a similar way. They have their Oceans 3.0 platform. Anybody, the general public, can go on there and download data, anything that Ocean Networks Canada is producing. And so we're actually working with Ocean Networks Canada right now to add our measurement capability, our turbulence sensing capability to some of their data gathering expeditions. ONC has been working really hard to expand their data gathering footprint, if you will, to do measurements in what they call the mid-water column. So not just the surface or the bottom, but also in between. And they started to operate these robotic platforms that I spoke earlier of. And so we're working with them to enable them to display basically or augment their or existing data sets with these very important turbulence parameters that everybody wants to know about now.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we've done a chamber chat with Kate Moran at Ocean Networks Canada, which is it's affiliated with UVic, and they have a website and they have cameras and sensors all over the world. So check that out online when you get a chance at Ocean Networks Canada. Okay, I'm almost afraid to ask this question, but when all of this data is collated and put together, what's it telling us about the condition of our oceans?
Okay, so I'm not going to take that bait to say what is the condition of our oceans.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is that so what we learn about this is how the climate change is affecting our oceans, and how what the trajectory is that we're on. So, like I mentioned so earlier, the turbulence is a parameter that has to do with the exchange of properties between the atmosphere and the ocean, and also transporting, let's say, gases like greenhouse gases down in the water column. Also oxygen and nutrients. So one of the particular interesting projects that we're starting to work on, there's a university in Bangor, Wales, And they have been doing some interesting work with our equipment. And this is sort of like the intersection of science and industry here. You know how there's more and more drive towards offshore wind farms, right? And so the offshore wind energy generation, they're putting more and more structures into the ocean. And these structures, they are being put into what's called the seasonal thermocline, where, you know, when you're swimming in the lake in the summer, you have like this ocean, this warm layer on the top, and then your feet are dangling down in that cold layer. So that's happening in the ocean, right? And so now imagine you're putting a mixer in there, and so those wind farm pylons, they're basically like starting to stir up this stratification, and that has an interesting effect because it has a tendency to bring up nutrients from the cold, deeper water up and oxygen down. So that has a very strong effect on the primary productivity. So this is one of the examples that we need to understand, where we need to understand the climate, and we need to understand what we're doing, like how are we interacting with this system.
And, you know, any body of work that's as successful as yours will also find some resistance or meet resistance at some point. So what kind of challenges, or if you will, turbulence, are you facing right now?
Well, the turbulence. So, I mean, we love turbulence. The whole team is driven by turbulence, and so we're a company that is growing and going places. So the challenges that we have is, you know, Victoria is a beautiful place to live. It's getting hard. It's getting more expensive, you know, for us as a company to operate here. One of the things that happened, so we have the majority of our team is located here in Victoria. We also have now a team of 4 people working out of Halifax, out of the Cove facility there. And this sounds pretty cool. And it was as part as a necessity, as it was a business expansion strategy, because, you know, we were recruiting people, and they said, man, like, I'd love to work for your company. You're doing such cool stuff, but it's hard. Can I actually, like, Victoria is an expensive place. Can I like work from Halifax? And we said, oh, okay, sure, why not? You know, this was also around the time of COVID, so like remote work was starting to take off, and now it's a thing. So now we have a team of 4 in Halifax.
The website is rocklandscientific.com. You can find out more there. It's fascinating stuff. It really is. We'll have to pick up this conversation another time. But Fabian Wolk, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Bruce. It was a pleasure.
Fabian is the president and co-founder of Rockland Scientific. And I'm Bruce Williams. I'll see you again for another Chamber Chat.